Gloria Chou, welcome to the WorkPlay Podcast.
Yay, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to go into all things PR with you, and it is such a treat to have you on our podcast. But first, I would love for you to introduce yourself, how long you've been in business, and what is your business?
So, I'm a small business PR coach, mainly helping women of color product owners get featured in gift guides. So, we're talking Oprah's favorite things, BuzzFeed, those things. For me, PR is about access, right? It's about making sure that all lived experiences get seen in the media. And so, when I talk about PR, I don't mean those pay to play things. I'm talking organic, powerful visibility.
And how did this all start for you? When did this start? What's the origin story
Yeah.
of doing all of this for you?
So very untraditional. So unlike a lot of other PR people, I've actually never worked a day in my life in any PR or marketing agency. So it's kind of interesting. I actually used to be a U.S. diplomat, so completely different. And I just was very unhappy working in government. I realized I needed to do something more creative and to be an entrepreneur. And so when I transitioned, when I wanted to work in PR, because I was always kind of everyone's unofficial hype woman. I always say my alter ego is like the hip hop MC that's like inviting people on stage and like getting the crowd ready. So I just love seeing people win. And I applied for like over 1,000 PR jobs, and they all wanted very cookie cutter PR agency experience, which I didn't have. And so the first client I got was like a friend of a friend, and they did this really weird like fintech AI platform. And they're like, we don't have a lot of money. We'll just pay you like a couple $100 if you can get us on TNT on TV, like CNBC, New York Times. And because I never worked in PR, I didn't have any contacts to draw from. So I kid you not, I had to type in the Google search bar New York Times newsroom, and I had to start dialing from the operator all the way up until I could get them featured. So it was thousands of cold calls, thousands of phones slammed in my face, thousands of no's, and just literally copy and pasting random emails. And throughout all of this testing process, I kind of cracked the code on how anyone can do their own PR. And I'm teaching this method now to entrepreneurs all over the world. And we're going to get a little bit more into it, but it's making about cold pitching accessible. And my whole thing is you don't need a publicist, you don't need to hire an agency. You absolutely should do your PR. You are your number one advocate.
I love that, and I love that you didn't go the traditional route, and it's almost like you didn't know what you didn't know, so you're able to get scrappy. And then
Mm-hmm.
through that, you're able to kind of understand the industry just from the way that you're going about it rather than like the cookie cutter way, which I think is so cool. I feel like you have to have a certain level of drive and almost like want to get the job done. Have you
Mm-hmm.
always been like that? Where did that start for you?
Ooh, you mean my thick skin, right? I've
Yeah.
always, yeah, it's funny because before I was a diplomat, I actually used to be a documentary producer. And so my job was taking Chinese filming crews all around the world and basically doing everything from securing interviews with Fortune 500 CEOs and also just like negotiating our film permits. And I think through that process of just being absolutely relentless, and it was so stressful. Like I had receding gum line after that job. I just became like a really, I don't know, like persistent person. And I think that's what got me through all of those times where I had to call with a sweaty hands, from people who are like, we don't know who you are. And I had 5 seconds to pitch them a story before they hung up on me. And if you repeat that many, many times, I just had just so many reps, right? So many reps of rejection that um, it really created the business that I have now. And not a lot of people do PR this way because it's a very traditional industry that says it's all about relationships. You have to pay us because we have these relationships. And so very quickly I found out that like, that's why no one's really doing their PR unless you have a lot of money in New York. It starts at around 5 to 10 grand a month for about 6 months retainer contract. And so PR was always seen as this like mystical, complex thing that you had to pay a lot of money for because there was a lot of gatekeeping. And so I think through cracking the code on it, I'm really disrupting the industry in this way. And through doing that, hopefully your audience, your listeners will understand that it's really not that complicated. It really isn't. And if you can have a repeatable framework that works, then you can keep getting PR and visibility all year round for your business.
And something that you said that was really interesting just about your origin story and creating the documentaries as well as like this element of storytelling. I would assume that you had to understand how to build a story, especially if you're if you were in this type of industry beforehand. How does that tie into that really fast pitch? Like, are there elements of a story that you have to grab onto immediately?
Yeah.
And like, what is that? What makes it a really compelling story?
So that's a really good question. So don't let anyone complicate things, right? If people are like PR is really complex, they're just trying to monetize on you. So PR at its core is really simple. It's writing a good pitch and sending it to the right person. And if you can just put the two and two together, you can do that 5x, 10x, even hire an intern or an assistant to do it. So let's talk about the pitch, right? Because that's half of it is writing a good pitch. Now, we're not taught this. So don't feel bad if you start your first draft and you have no idea, because again, we're not taught this. So, how do we write a pitch? A lot of times as founders, we want to do the same as our marketing pitch. So we're sending them our services, our price sheet, like all of the things that you would sell to a customer, but the journalist is not going to buy from you. And so it's really important for us to not speak to the journalist like that, like the way we always speak to customers. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to realize that we don't need anything groundbreaking, right? It's not about like having some earth shattering breaking news. It's just creating content. And the news cycle is 24/7. Magazines always need to interview diverse people. So you're actually doing them a favor by giving them content. Now, a lot of times we get tripped up because we think, oh, well, I'm not doing anything novel or I'm not a big brand. And I will tell you that that's the biggest thing that stops us. One of my clients, she's a Pilates teacher, and she got featured in an article titled, "What is Pilates?" in 2023. So that just goes to show that there is content for every stage of beginner to advanced. So don't let the fact that you're doing something that's not completely new stop you. The third thing is that journalists absolutely want to hear from the founder directly. Let's just remove the middlemen, right? Like they don't want to talk to a PR rep; they want to talk to you. So let's just reduce that friction and give them what they need. Another reason why it's important for founders to pitch is that think about it this way: if journalists only interviewed Fortune 500 companies and big brands, they would probably lose credibility very quickly. And so ethical journalism, for them to be legitimate and credible, they need to interview people from all different walks of life. So why have it not be you? So in terms of the pitch, I found from, again, pitching thousands of times with broken email links and all this stuff, that if my pitch had these three things, it probably had a really good chance of being answered. And this works for verbal pitching, like on the phone, DMs. It could work for speaking at conferences, pitching yourself for awards. It's my CPR pitching method. C stands for credibility, P stands for point of view, R stands for relevance. And you want to have all three things anytime you are pitching to the other person that you might not know to get a yes from the other side. So, how this looks in an email, right? So, give me an example of someone like of one of your clients. Like what do they do?
So let's do an example of maybe an online business owner
Okay,
that,
like a speaking coach.
yeah, like a speaking coach or
Okay,
even a service provider. Just because I
perfect.
know that you specialize in product, but I want to at least give them a little tips
Yeah.
and tricks.
Yeah, so we have both in our program. So we have worked with a lot of authors, a lot of marketers, like AI people. So I'll give you an example. Let's say someone who's like an author, right, and she does AI stuff. So the subject line of the email is not going to be your name, your company name, and the word pitch. Like, do not put that in there because it's irrelevant to the journalist who doesn't know you. What we want to do for the subject line is we want to be very concise and specific to what is it that you're pitching. And the subject line should almost read like the title of an article. So for this person, let's say, speaking coach or author, it could be like how introvert, like three words that introverts can use to stand out in a crowd of extroverts in the boardroom. So you see how that reads like an article title. It's specific. It tells them exactly what it is. You want it to be specific. You want not to just be like, here are some tips for introverts. Like, how can we make it even more specific? Like, is it introverts at the C level? Is it introverts at the junior level? You know what I mean? And then in terms of the email, the CPR method, I like to start with the relevance first because the journalist is scanning and you don't want them to click off the page. So you want to grab them right away with the relevance because What is news if it's not relevant? So, relevance, think about the season that we're in. Are we in back to school? Is there something happening in the news cycle? Is there a pop culture trend? Are we in winter and we're in a reflective mode? Is there a new like piece of data that came out that you can kind of piggyback on? Is it pitching for the New Year's when people are looking for new skills? Like all of these things, you need to tie in some kind of relevance, right? It could be about graduation and it's about the job market. So I want to start off with that relevance. Where are we in this point in time? And then the email will have P as in point of view, which is 3 bullet points. I like threes because it reads nicely. So it could be 3 tips, 3 tricks, 3 insights, 3 things, right? Because remember, we're positioning you as an expert. So for this speaking coach, it could be, here are the 3 words that introverts can use to really stand out at a board meeting. And then I want to end the email with C as in credibility, which is just a couple sentences about how, you've been in this industry for X, Y, and Z years. If you've been on a podcast or if you've gotten any awards, feel free to mention that, although that's not necessary. And then simply just say, I'm happy to speak more about this and offer your audience, solutions to whatever problem that they're having, like insert the problem. I can be reached on. And then you just put your phone number so that they can call and text. Do you see how the energy of this pitch is not, it's not desperation. It's not, please feature me because I can't afford an ad, right? It's very much like I have something to say. This is my point of view, and I would love to be a part of the solution. So anytime you're pitching, pitch with the insight, the relevance, and see how you can offer a solution to their problem.
I love that you just broke that down, and thank you. That is such a treat to just have those actionable things right away, which is why I love you and why you're on this podcast right now. So, why do you think that this is so gatekeep? Because this seems like such a rinse and repeat process. And I'm just wondering, I'm curious, like, why is this so hard for people? Like, what do you think is holding people back?
I think that again, like no one's doing PR in this way, and it's very much a relationship. Like they sell it to us as a relationship thing, right? Like you need to pay us $10,000 so that we can call up our buddies at Forbes. And journalists are accepting pitches all year round. Their inboxes are open, their emails are public information. It's not private information. And so what we're doing here is radical. We're pitching ourselves, but it's also hard, especially for women and especially for women of color to like advocate for ourselves. A lot of times we're taught, well, who are we to promote ourselves? Or maybe my business is not ready yet. And so we're constantly like waiting our turn when in truth, there's people who are way more mediocre with businesses that are way more early stage that are taking up the spots. So I think it's both a mindset and the fact that there's a whole industry monetizing on the fact that, they don't want you to know this information really.
I love this. And I'm glad that you say that because it's almost like destigmatizing like the fact that you can't get, you know, publicity if you are a smaller company, and you're basically turning that on its head and saying, no, this is available to anyone and everyone if you want it.
Yes.
What are some of the things that we can do once we have made the pitch? Maybe it gets accepted. Maybe let's say Forbes accepts the pitch. It's going to go out in, the next 2 weeks. What does that look like for optimization? How are we actually seeing like a return on investment when we're spending time sending out pitches? It finally gets picked up. How can we bring that back into our business to say like, this article is going to make me money?
Well, I will say that, PR and organic press features is the only marketing activity that simultaneously not only gets you sales, visibility, traffic, but also SEO. So like ads don't have SEO or authority. Social media don't have authority or SEO. So in terms of backlinks and how do I work smarter for my time as a CEO, I don't think there's a better use of your time. Now, yes, it's going to take some time and it's not going to be as fun as making 2 or 3 reels, but like we're not really targeting the right people with reels. We don't even know if they're ever going to buy from us. So I would rather shift my mindset and see how I can work smarter and not harder. Now, once we get that Forbes article, then we can start to charge higher prices. We have backlinks that we can use for SEO, and then we can repurpose that into 5-10 pieces of content. I would so much rather get on an article or get on a podcast and repurpose that into 20 pieces of content than start natively on Instagram, which can be hacked or restricted or banned at any time. So again, it's a different mindset that we have to step into to figure out how can I work smarter and not harder. And so the longevity of the press features, the authority that especially for a service provider, right? How do you stand out from someone else who's offering something the same? It's it's very powerful to be able to say, like, here's my story, that here's my write-up in Business Insider, here's places I've been featured. Now, I want to be careful with this. Like, I want you to focus on the earned media, because there's a lot of PR scammers out there that will say, like, oh, well, you can get featured in X, Y, and Z. Those are just ads. So you basically pay for an ad and it actually says advertising content. And so a lot of times people are scamming like small business owners with this fake PR promise, and it's not editorial. It's so we want to be careful with that.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I know I have gotten so many DMs where it's like, oh, get featured in Forbes, get featured in Business Insider. So what you're saying is those people are going to charge you a price to basically put a story out in those articles, but you're saying it's not even a story, it's just an ad.
Yeah, so it'll look like a story, but it's actually an ad, and it won't have that SEO because it's not going to show in the editorial content. So basically, they're upcharging you for an ad that you can buy yourself. And so they're just taking another additional cut of it. And so they, unfortunately, I get those too. And it's funny because I'm like, your targeting is awful. um, but there's a lot of bad actors out there. There's a lot of people who pretend like you're getting PR, and it's just upcharging you for an ad that you can already have. And that, honestly, it makes my job harder. And another thing is, you're not building a relationship with the journalist. The beautiful thing about you pitching yourself and taking this process in house is that every journalist that you connect with, that is your network and your relationship that you can keep for life. And so anytime the journalist is writing something else, it's very possible that they would also be like, hey, do you have a quote for this? Because at that point, you've been vetted. They know that you're a sane, well-spoken person. So you just need that one yes. And from there, everything can blossom. You can even ask the journalist, like, hey, do you know anyone writing a story about X, Y, and Z? And they would be more than happy to point you in the right direction.
That's interesting, because again, I just don't think people realize how relationship based it is. And maybe that's what feels hard about it, because it's like, oh, I'm not in that circle, or I'm not in that industry, the PR industry, so I don't know how to do that. But it seems to me like the barrier to entry is pretty low.
Yeah, it really is. And journalists, again, like I said, they want to talk to real people, right? And they're also on Instagram and LinkedIn, and a lot of their inboxes are wide open. And this is actually how they make stories. Like they depend on new content. If it was only the 10, 20 people on their speed dial, then it would not be very diverse and it would be lackluster stories. So you're absolutely doing them a favor by providing them that content.
So interesting. It's almost like that, like you were saying, that mindset shift of like, okay, they actually need me just as much as I need them, which is,
Yeah.
I think, important to remember here.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
were talking to, when you were chatting about making the pitch, right? You're chatting about all of these different angles that you can go at. In my head, because I always think in terms of visuals, I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting. Like if you were doing a story on this, or like this subject, you could effectively create visuals on a quarterly shoot for that piece or for that story. How far in advance are you creating these stories? Because my WorkPlay members are planning their shoots about 3 months out before the shoot date. And so, if they were to use this strategy, when do you think they should start thinking about their pitches in alignment with their visuals?
So if it's print, then you want to be, like maybe 5 or 6 months in advance. But for most of what we're talking about, it's digital, right? So that way you can share it, and there's SEO. So like a Marie Claire, or like an InStyle, or Well and Good. So that could be done even a month or even 2 weeks before it gets published. Everyone's editorial timeline is different, but now with everything moving very quickly, it's absolutely not too late. I would say pitch no earlier than 3 months before whatever it is you're pitching. At the time of recording, we're in Q4, so there's a lot of like seasonal holiday angles, whether it's gifts or recipes or things. So I would say, like, 2 months before a major holiday, 3 months is plenty of time. And so, especially if you make a product, right, it's really important to have really good photos, to have your website, buttoned up, because what you're going to do in that pitch is you're going to embed one or two photos. So I don't want you to embed like all the photos because it's going to trigger their spam filter. You don't want to have crazy attachments, but the hyperlink is a beautiful way for them to find out more. And then you can simply hyperlink to your about section or to whatever page with all the photos.
That's so interesting. I could totally see someone in our process or, a WorkPlay member being like, okay, here's all the holidays for this Q4 and just creating a visual campaign for that. And then, obviously creating the systems around their pitch structure to adhere to all of that. But then at least they would have all of the visuals for that strategy to kind of be in place, which I love. How many pitches should we be sending every single month?
So with the CPR method, you just need to start with one really good pitch, right? So start with the one that fits all the boxes. What I mean is this the best one for this season? Is it timely? I always say you don't want to pitch something that's going to work 2 years into the future or 2 years into the past. So the people who get featured are people who are riding on the coattails of that seasonality. So again, the season, the relevance, is it piggybacking on another societal trend? Like whatever that is, you always want to pitch for that. So that's really the most important thing. So you want to figure out of everything that you can pitch, let's say you are a service provider and you're helping people with marketing, right? What is changing in marketing? So right now there's a lot of AI changes. There's a lot of privacy updates. There's a lot of different algorithmic changes. So you always want to pitch that something that maybe just broke the news or something that people are talking about. And so then get that dialed in with your CPR method, have the right subject line, have the relevance, the point of view, the credibility. And then also that's half of it, right? Half of it is writing a pitch. And the second half is knowing who to send it to. And that's really important. It's not going to be the editor at Well and Good because they're busy. It's not going to be info@buzzfeed.com because that goes into an internet black hole. You want to find the person who specifically writes about your niche or your beat. So if you are in health and wellness, it's going to be the health and wellness person. If you make a physical product and you want to get into a gift guide, it's going to be the shopping or commerce editor who does these product roundups. If you are if you want to pitch an education story, right, it could be the education or social topics person. So that's really important, is that you want to get very specific with who you're pitching. And so the next question naturally is, well, how do we know? How do we get these contacts? And in my program, we have a database of over 100,000 journalists across 150 categories. But you can very well start grassroots and create your own media list. What you can do is in Google, type in Google News Alert, and you can create a news alert with all the articles being published on your topic. And then it's as easy as you seeing the article and copy and pasting the journalist, the writer's name and email, because it's all public information. And you just put it into an Excel spreadsheet and you can quickly start to grow that media list. There's a couple other ways you can find journalists. One is sign up for HARO, which stands for Help a Reporter Out. And you can sign up as a source where it'll ping you with the hundreds of different inquiries journalists are looking for that day. And it's not all going to fit your demographic, right? They might be interviewing people who are pet sitters or bakers. So you want to go through the email and make sure that that inquiry fits, what you can do, like who you are. And then there's also hashtags you can follow on social media, such as hashtag journal request, which is on Twitter and LinkedIn. And so that is when a journalist is requesting a certain person that they can get a quote from. So those are all kind of very grassroots way of you populating your own media list. And then you just put that together with your pitch and you can start sending it.
I love that. No one is going to have any excuse not to do PR after this episode, which is making me very happy. As far as knowing if something is working versus if it's not, you had mentioned having that one pitch that is going to work. How do we know if we need to scrap that pitch? Like, how do we know when it's not working? Is there a certain amount of times that you pitch it and like they're not picking it up? Like, what does that KPI look like that we can watch out for?
Yeah, so that's really good. I would say one hack that I love to teach our members is install an email tracking software. Like, know who's opening it, because a lot of times we create a drama in our head of like, oh, the journalist doesn't like me. And it's like, well, your email never got open. So then we have to solve for the right problem. Is it a deliverability issue? Is it a subject line issue? Or maybe that person no longer works there. So install an email tracking device. I use mailtrack.io, which is now bought by MailSuite, and it's pretty cheap. It's like a Chrome extension. I like sending emails through Gmail, so it tells me if that journalist clicked on an email and how many times they've opened it. And if they've opened it, then I would simply follow up 1 week later, and keep following up. And if they've opened it many times, which the software will tell you, it's a sign that they really like what I'm pitching. They just are trying to find a place for it. In which case, you obviously would still want to keep them warm. But a great way to follow up is nurture the relationship by complimenting them on their latest article. Because remember, journalists are writing stories every day, right? So it's like, hey, I love the story that you wrote last week about X, Y, and Z. I just wanted to follow up with this because this season is approaching. And so as a news cycle is always changing, there's always ways to freshen up your follow up. For example, we have someone who's in insurance, right? And so he's doing healthcare consulting. Right now, at the time of recording, it's going to be open enrollment soon. So then I would advise him to put that in the email. Like, hey, as we're 3 weeks out from open enrollment. So think about how you can bring constant relevance to any type of follow up or email.
So good. I feel like we're going to have so many different ways that we can do this. So, when do you know that you need help in this department? When do you know that it's like, okay, we got to go into Gloria's program? How do you know that you can't really do it on your own anymore?
Well, I always say, like, in terms of when you should do PR is like if you're ready to accept someone's money for your services or product, then you're ready for PR, right? It's the best way to stand out, like I said, and it makes you it gives you that credibility, that SEO in a way that the no Instagram post will. In terms of joining my program is like, it's just time. Like, do you want to be like searching for broken links and having ugly cries like I did, which is pretty exhausting? Or do you just want to have a database that you can pull from? Let's say if you are a speaking coach or if you're a money coach, just go into the database and pull out all the contacts for anyone who writes about that. And then I also have 50 different templates of pitches I already wrote for your industry. So it's just about time and just like how committed you are. But I definitely recommend everyone to watch my free masterclass, and where I actually give you a screenshot word for word of a pitch with the CPR method that got someone featured. And you can go to gloriachoupr.com/masterclass to watch that. Gloria, CHOU, PR.com/masterclass. So it's really important to like first understand the concept of how to pitch and understand that, PR is going to be more powerful. And then once you make a commitment of like, I do want to get on more podcasts. I do want to be more visible. I know that this is the one thing that's keeping me from, making all this content that I hate, like being on social media all the time. Then I think it would be a great time for you to join. And I'm available. Like I have a lot of freebies as well. So feel free to DM me anytime.
Okay, I love that. I love that. So, I want to switch gears into visuals because most of our listeners are creating visuals on this quarterly basis. I feel like everyone listening now understands how to create the pitch, how to understands PR is going to be necessary. How can they maximize their brand shoots every single quarter to amplify their PR strategy? Like what would you be creating on a quarterly basis to really complement this?
Yeah, so if you make product, right, think about what you're picking for the season. It's important that you only pitch one or two products max. You don't want to give them a full brochure. So in that case, if you know that you're getting into Q4, and if, let's say you make skincare, you want to have some ingredients for like cozy, moisturizing, like winter skin. So then obviously you would want to 3 months before that take product photos for that product that you're pitching. In terms of like if you're a speaker, I would like to have different types of personalities, right? So like, are you someone that's more fun, or are you someone that's kind of more buttoned up and traditional? So making sure that you have various assets of your personality, where like maybe in that one pitch to a podcast host, you can put two photos together just to show that you are a dynamic person.
I think that's amazing advice. And I could really see maybe someone coming into the WorkPlay process using that first shoot to really get all of those baseline content for their pitches. And then seasonally, as you go throughout the year,
Mhm.
focusing in on one or two things that you can then seasonally pitch to your PR contacts. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think you probably need less like like of a specific strategy if you are a service-based consultant, right? Because
Mhm.
at that point, it's more really about your pitch and having like a like a good website. And if you make products, then obviously there would be more seasonality to it. But I think in general, in what I recommend is like you're always in the pitch going to have a hyperlink of like find out more, because that's how you can get the journalist to click if they're interested. And so that website that they click on, you're going to need to have really good visuals to show that you are an authority to speak on that topic.
And for anyone that's out there that's like, what does good look like in the PR world? Like, can you, and I know that this might be hard, but what does good visuals look like? What are journalists going to be like, oh, yeah, this is a legit, business owner?
Yeah, I think like high resolution, obviously, right? If you make a product and if you want to pitch to something that's like more of a millennial, like a Well and Good or a Pop Sugar, then the aesthetics probably should match, right? Because you're basically saying, hey, I want you to show this to your millennial female audience. But then if it looks dated, there's kind of a mismatch. So think about the audience that you're pitching to. Obviously, like a Martha Stewart or a Southern Living, Oprah's favorite things is probably older women. So think about that as well in your visuals. And then depending on which audience you're pitching to, I would pick the photo shoot or the product that that matches that theme the most.
Okay, so good. I love this. I learned so much from this, Gloria. Thank you so much for being on the WorkPlay podcast. Where can everyone find you? Where can people join the program if they're wanting to implement both the WorkPlay method and your PR strategies at the same time?
Yeah, so you can find me on all the things at Gloria Chou PR. If you DM me the word pitch, I will give you another pitching freebie on Instagram. So that's at Gloria Chou PR. I'm generally like always in my DMs, and I just love to meet business owners in general, especially female founders. And to join my program, we're actually really excited because we're doing a full rebrand. I actually got my photo shoot with you and Workplace, so you're going to see that. It's called the Get Featured Accelerator. So you can go to getfeaturedaccelerator.com and you'll be able to find out how we are basically taking control of our messaging and how we are guiding the next generation of female founders to be their number one advocate. And I also have a podcast, Small Business PR, where I interview journalists, things that no agency will tell you. So we get really deep in terms of like, how do you like the subject line? What's your biggest pet peeve? Like all the questions that you can't really find anywhere. Feel free to just listen to my podcast, Small Business PR. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Such a treat to have you. Thank you so much, Gloria.